Hey friends, it's Heather. I have another layout to share with you from my creative scrapbook. Thank you for joining me. If you are new, if you are already a subscriber, thank you so much for watching. I am working with the main kit for October, and it is filled with Paige Evans' Truly Grateful. I'm starting out with one of the pattern papers and applying some clear gesso because I knew I wanted to add some mixed media, although I wasn't quite sure what yet. I first started though with that so it could dry while I put my little pumpkins together. These are cut files from October of last year. So if you scroll down all the cut files, you'll see those listed, the pumpkins included in a set for October of 2018. So I resized a couple of them and I backed them with some pretty pattern papers from the kit, and I'm using some Distress Oxide ink just to ink the edges of them because they're going on that pattern paper that's mainly white, just has some little colored rainbow dots or matching dots, I should say. So I wanted them to stick out a little bit from the background. And at this point, I still hadn't really decided what I was going to add to it, even though I knew I was going to add some mixed media. And after edging my little pumpkins, I am going to hand stitch all the white lines of the pumpkin. So it took a little bit of time, but it's totally worth it. They look so cute. And I love the patterns in this collection. I remember struggling while I was inking those little itty bitty areas. So at this point, I did struggle a little bit with changing my background because I always tend to go for the lighter, either white cardstock or lighter. So I debated for a little bit using this pattern paper, and because I couldn't decide, I decided to go through some of the embellishments and try and figure out what I was going to use, and yeah, that's where I land. I tried. There you go, back and forth. And this is actually basil marshmallow, and it has a creamier like white than the normal American Crafts white cardstock I use, and I really like how that looked. Even though I cut the pumpkins out in white cardstock, once I stitched and I added the ink around the edges, it didn't bother me so much. So I am going to mat my entire layout on a piece of orange cardstock from my stash, which was really exciting because I don't use orange very well. If you watched my last video, I did the same thing with purple, and this collection's giving me the opportunity to use some colors that I don't normally use very often. So I really like the way this orange cardstock looks, and I tried to trim it down with that trimmer, and that cardstock is so thick, and then when you add gesso to it, it makes it even harder. So then I had to take it over to my Tim Holtz guillotine. I always say that bad. Anyway, so this is my thought with the pumpkins. I wanted to add some little leaves to them. Those two little photos of my daughter from the pumpkin patch last year, I matted on some white cardstock and just inked the edges of that too. It was actually the first year that I did not go to the pumpkin patch with her since she was born. I was on a scrapbook weekend retreat and my husband took her, and I was feeling really, really bad about it, but he insisted I go, and that just happened to be the only weekend that they could go to the pumpkin patch. So it was kind of sad, but he did manage to get me a couple of usable photos, barely. Anyway, so I took some gold trim from my stash. It is from Lawn Fawn, and I wrapped it around what are those called? The stems of the pumpkin? I'm not sure what those are called. And I tied them in a bow, and then I took some of the leaf die cuts and I glued them. So I did 3 on each pumpkin, and I just kind of like the twine was holding the leaves, or I don't know. I just thought it was cute, and I ruffled up the edges a little bit. I like to do that with the die cuts just to give them a little bit of dimension so they're not just sitting flat. I do take some more of the other leaf die cuts and I scatter them along the bottom of the layout, you know, kind of like as if they were falling. And then that is what gave me this idea. So I kept my Distress Oxide inks out, and keeping with the sort of rainbow fashion of Paige Evans' collection, and actually probably most of her collections, like the rainbow, and this one had this like watercolor type look to some of the pieces. So I pulled this stencil from my stash. It has leaves on it, but you could do this with any stencil you have. I mean, it doesn't even have to be like an object. It could be dots or stripes or something. I just happen to have leaves. So I am just adding a little bit of ink from each color, and sort of in, not necessarily in true rainbow order, but in the order that I wanted them to go in, kind of from light to dark. I know that there is, oh boy, so the green that I use is Evergreen Bough, and I use Seedless Preserves, and Picked Raspberry, Abandoned Coral, Wild Honey, and Spiced Marmalade. Actually, it's not spiced marmalade. It is carved pumpkin, which is appropriate. So I do have different little sponge pieces for each ink. I don't have different applicators, like the actual handle for each of my inks. So I was just making sure to switch those out and before I dipped it into another ink pad. So I left a space open there because I knew my pumpkins were going to go there, and then my photos. So it almost kind of like the leaves are falling and like blowing in the wind. That was my idea. So of course I've done all of this, and I haven't even attached it to the to the orange cardstock yet. So because Distress Oxide inks or any distress products are reactive with water, I was able to go in with a wet brush and a paper towel and just sort of brush away some of the partial leaves, like not all of them, but just some of them where I just got a little bit of ink into another space and I didn't like the way it looks. So really easy, especially since I put gesso on it. I am also using my Tonic shimmer pen to add lots and lots of shimmer to the leaves, the die cut leaves, and the leaves on my pumpkins and some of the flowers. And also on the left hand side of the screen there, you'll see I have it's actually from, what is it, Close to My Heart, I think. Yes, Close to My Heart. I have a couple of their like glitter gels. This one's in bronze. And I pulled that out because I was kind of thinking I wanted some glitter on there. And so this is when I realized that I cut down my white cardstock, my orange cardstock too much. Yep. It wasn't quite 12 inches. So I found a piece of brown cardstock. I had to dig deep because that's not a color I have a lot of. And then I matted it again, and I actually really like the way that it looks. I don't usually matte layouts like twice, let alone once, let alone twice, but I like the way that it finishes it off. So that other pen that I just scribbled out on is a Tonic Nuvo glitter marker in Iced Americano, and I bought it and I love the color. I've never actually used it, and I still don't, but I was kind of trying to compare what would work better, but I still didn't know what I was going to use it on. But I was making sure the color matched. So this is what I decided to do. I just squeezed out some of that glitter gel from close to my heart. And then I take a brush and I just sort of spread it around like my leaves are glittery. And the brown seemed appropriate. I didn't want to do clear because, I don't know, that seemed a little bit more wintry to me. So I add that on my leaves, some of my pumpkins, and I added on some of the leaves that are down at the bottom. And at this point, I have not added a title. I didn't even think about a title. And I end up adding it off camera. Just because I went back and forth, so I stopped the camera because I couldn't decide what I wanted to do. I didn't want to cover up my pumpkins, but there wasn't something that I wanted to use like immediately that worked like above my photos or anything. So I end up taking the Adore Puffy Phrase sticker from that set, and I put it over my photos, and it's in 2 pieces, so I was able to curve it. So you will see that in the still shots at the end. I do keep that little banner there, add a little acorn, and I go in adding some finishing touches from the puffy stickers, like those little dots and hearts. I love that those are included on the sticker sheets. I wish more collections were, and maybe they will be now that Paige Evans has done it. So just adding some little hearts here and there. And I do go in and add some journaling about the whole story, about how this was the first pumpkin patch trip I missed, which made me a little sad. But I wanted to document that. She still had fun. Her and her dad compete for picking the biggest pumpkins because he's still a kid most days. So I am just about finished. Like I said, I add the title off camera because once I decided, I didn't want to turn the camera back on and take the title off and put it back on for you. So I apologize. There it is. It worked really well because it's in 2 pieces, and so I could curve it. And I really like the way that looks. So I hope you enjoyed this process and you were inspired to create some pumpkins, maybe hand stitch them, or colorful falling leaves. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate your support. Please hit like and subscribe if you're not already. I would really appreciate it. Thanks so much. Have a great day. Bye.